So welcome to this final day of Holy Week, and I thought it would be good today to come out of the confines of our house and be here in the gardens of Launt Abbey. Today on this spring morning, looking at their best with all their new life and colour and beauty. Many of you will recognise them because you've been here and like others have come to find refreshment, retreat and renewal. Except of course today there is no one here, and we are aware amidst the stillness of the turmoil of what's going on in the world around and the uncertainty that surrounds us all. Even within the beauty and the stillness there is a certain melancholy. And that's a bit like Holy Week. There is a peace and stillness after the drama of the day before. But the shadow of the crucifixion hangs over this day, and we don't yet know what is going to happen next. Well, we're feeling that particularly this year, when there are no preparations for Easter to get busy with in our churches. No buildings to decorate, no lilies to arrange, no Easter egg hunts to organise. All the usual things to be done on Holy Saturday. And as we said right at the beginning of the week, if often we are tempted to rush through Holy Week to get to Easter Day as quickly and painlessly as possible, we might find ourselves lingering on Holy Saturday, a bit longer this year, not so sure of the happy ending, of what's coming next, of what resurrection might look like when these dark days are over. So I want to start this final day of Holy Week at sundown of the night before, which was in fact, of course, when the Jewish days started, and to go to John's account of the moments after Jesus had died. And here we encounter Joseph of Arimathea, the prominent member of the Sanhedrin, who was a secret disciple of Jesus, and who appears with Nicodemus at the end of the Passion story to bury Jesus' body. So let's listen to how John writes about him. Later, Joseph of Arimathea asked Pilate for the body of Jesus. Now Joseph was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, because he feared the Jewish leaders. With Pilate's permission, he came and took the body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, the man who had earlier visited Jesus at night. Nicodemus brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 35 kilograms. Taking Jesus' body, the two of them wrapped it with the spices in strips of linen. This was in accordance with Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. Unlike the other Gospels, there are no women in John attending to the body of Jesus. Instead, it is Joseph and Nicodemus who bring the spices and prepare him for burial. It struck me how moving it was to see these two respectable men, pillars of the establishment, prominent members of the council, being there right at the end, handling the mess of Jesus' broken body with gentle, tender care. For me, it inspired this poem about Joseph of Arimathea called Enough. O broken body of my dear friend, at least you are now at peace. And I can offer you gentle hands, not those who struck you with fists and staff, slapped you, flogged you, and nailed you to wood. I hold you now with tenderness, binding wounds with strips of cloth, and letting spices be the fragrance of your love, shut out by those who could only smell the death of their dissolving kingdoms. How still the body that overflowed with the life of God. How quiet the lips that awakened dreams of hope and possibility. Limp the hands that touch life into damaged bodies. Closed the eyes that looked into our souls with compassionate fire. So has all we loved and feared, saw and believed, come to this? Is this the end? And could I have done more to make it different? Should I have spoken louder, rocked the boat, disturbed the system, lived my discipleship more by day than just by night? Of course I could. We all could. We all could have done much more. Except you, Lord. You gave all, everything you had. And what you gave is enough for us both. Enough for me to know some peace as I lay you down on this sad night and wait for dawn. Could I have done more to make it different? That's a solemn question and a really important one, because the answer will reveal the extent to which we are letting the story impact our lives. I believe that it is only as we have asked that question, truthfully, honestly, that we're ready for Easter. Joseph was a good man, a respected and sensitive Jewish leader. And there's a huge dignity in what he is doing in the gospel story, and no doubt some risk. But how would he have felt as he held the body of Jesus in his arms? John describes him as a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, because he feared the Jewish leaders. So I imagine this searching question: could I have done more to make it different? And the answer is, of course I could. We all could. We all could have done so much more. And that perhaps is the uncomfortable realization of Holy Saturday. Sometimes it's harder for good people to get to that point of owning their insufficiency than those living close to the edge with failure or impossibility staring them in the face. That was the great realization that the Apostle Paul had to get to. He had every reason for human confidence, as he tells the Philippians in Philippians 3. If others think they have reasons to put confidence in the flesh, he says, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, in regard to the law, a Pharisee, as for zeal, persecuting the church, as for righteousness based on the law, faultless. He was a true Jew, coming from the tribe of Jacob's youngest son by his favoured wife Rachel, the same tribe as Israel's first king, Saul, true to the ancient Hebrew language, utterly zealous for the law as part of the Pharisees, actively opposing any threats to his religion as a persecutor of the church, and therefore, as for righteousness based on the law, faultless. If anyone could say, "I have done enough," it was the Apostle Paul. But instead he concludes, "But whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ." And he goes on, "I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow attaining to the resurrection from the dead." Becoming like him in his death, and so somehow attaining to the resurrection. The prerequisite of experiencing the power of the resurrection is first to experience something like death, to come to an end of ourselves and any sense of self-sufficiency. Gerard Hughes, in his book The God of Surprises, puts it like this: "We can only come to know the risen Christ when we have experienced some kind of death, some disillusionment with ourselves and others, some loss, bereavement, sense of fear, hopelessness or meaninglessness, and have not tried to anaesthetize ourselves against it. The answer is in the pain, which is revealing to us our poverty and our need of God." I like to imagine that Joseph and Nicodemus were no longer secret disciples after Good Friday. Sometimes it takes a catastrophe like the crucifixion to bring home the seriousness of the battle, to motivate commitment and courage. Perhaps many of us are in a similar place on this Holy Saturday. Aware of the global catastrophe of COVID-19, we wonder whether we could have done more, whether we could have been part of a world that was more prepared for such a time as this, with less inequality, more security for the vulnerable, more spending on essentials rather than luxuries, more spiritual capital and not just material. Of course we could have done more. That's the reality of Holy Saturday. We're ready for the resurrection when we know that it is God who has to do something for us to go on. When we know that however good or competent we are, we cannot just organise ourselves out of this situation. That change needs to come from beyond us. Faith will be important, and the resurrection will often be discerned and realised through faith. But it is not created by faith. Something has to happen to create the faith which, when we're in the depth of pain or confusion or impossibility, feels a million miles away. We can only come as we are and look to the God of resurrection to do the next bit. The next bit will be different. Some years ago, I picked up a virus that put me off work for a number of weeks and seemed to elude diagnosis by the doctor. During that time, I got quite low and frustrated, but was particularly struck by some words I read of Metropolitan Anthony Bloom in his book School of Prayer, when he said this: "So often what we would like to have through prayer, through the deep relationship with God which we long for, is simply another period of happiness. We're not prepared to sell all that we have to buy the pearl of great price." Those words penetrated sharply my state of mind at the time, because I just wanted to get better. I just wanted to feel happy again. I just wanted life to return to normal. But I began to see that God had a bigger, deeper, fuller agenda than just the return of happiness. There were lessons to learn in the vulnerability that my illness had created. And so on this Holy Saturday, we realize the importance of waiting. Not anxiously, because we do believe in the resurrection, and tomorrow we will celebrate it. But not glibly, expecting life just to revert to normal after this time is over. We may be particularly conscious of our failures and pain and vulnerability, but we only need to look at the cross to know that God's love and grace is more than enough to cover those things. And Easter Day will wonderfully demonstrate that. So let us wait and trust and be ready to notice the shape of resurrection as it emerges for us and for our world.
I tread on the grass where the dew lies deep, while the air is clear and the world's asleep. I tramp on the verge of a dream that's gone. How I miss the Lord of the morning. Morning, how can daylight dawn? Now I miss the Lord of the morning. I trod through the streets on the resting day, not a soul in sight, not a child at play. I tramped on the ash of a far once bright. How I miss the Lord of the morning. Morning, let it still be night, for I miss the Lord of the morning. I trod all the way from the town to the hill, and I found my way, but I lost my will. I tramped up the stairs to a room turned strange. How I miss the Lord of the morning. Morning, nothing can derange. How I miss the Lord of the morning. I trod at the hours on a wine-stained floor, till the darkness warned of the day in store. I tramped to a garden engulfed in dread. How I miss the Lord of the morning. Morning, life and love are dead, and I miss the Lord of the morning.
I tread on the grass where the dew lies deep, while the air is clear and the world's asleep. I tramp on the verge of an endless dawn, for I am the Lord of the morning. Morning, darkness now has gone, and I